There has been a fire reported in the building. Please proceed to the nearest exit and leave the building.
This is just a drill.
That's 98 security. Floor 2 is clear.
Nacht Waffen 2010.
Welcome to Nacht Waffen Pilot with Penny Bradley, and we have Eric Hecker of Deciphering My Experience back to talk about his time in Antarctica. And welcome back to the show, Eric.
Thank you, Penny. Thank you very much for having me back, and I look forward to speaking to you as always.
So, while I was at your place in July, I saw your pay stubs from your time at the Raytheon South Pole Base. And so I know for a fact you were actually there. And I'm stating that because everybody in our community has suddenly demanded proof of everything. So I'm saying up front, I've seen the documents, I've seen your patch from your 300 degree club. So you want to start off telling us what that is?
Sure, that's a fun one. The 300 Club at the South Pole Station is an illustrious group and a small number. Not every year in the wintertime does it actually get to minus 100 degrees ambient over the course of the winter season. They do have a sauna at the South Pole Station, and it's a tradition that when the temperature does actually get down to minus 100 degrees ambient, the weather folks let us know, and the sauna then gets fired up to at least positive 200. We actually set it for 214. I forget what the reason was. I think it was for pi, 3.14, actually now. Because we technically did the 314 Club, technically.
Okay.
So the idea is that it gets to minus 100 degrees outside, and we're waiting in the sauna at plus 214 with the radio, and we're exclusively just wearing our winter boots and a towel, nothing else. And then when you get the radio signal, you exit the sauna, you run very briefly down the hallway to what's called the beer can, and that's cold. But you run down a flight of stairs to the exit door, and at that point, you are butt naked, soaking wet in sweat. You drop your towel, and you run outside in the pitch black of South Pole winter and find the South Pole. I think we used the geographic pole. I'm sorry. Yes, we used the geographic pole. The ceremonial would have been too far away. So we ran around the geographic South Pole in our boots and birthday suits. And so it was a 314 degree temperature difference on our body. But we surpassed the minimum of 300. And it was quite an interesting event. I was able to get some patches and some T-shirts and some stickers out of it, all the wonderful paraphernalia for, things like that. I guess it's similar to like in the military, they have like, the blue nose and the shell back and things like that for other things that can happen, traditions. But that was ours at the South Pole. It was called the 300 Club. And it was a blast. I mean, I really... I remember just thinking, don't fall down, because the ice, the snow was it's temped at like minus 60 degrees, pretty much year round. So if you pretty much didn't want to fall down and get my ding dong in the ice.
I can understand that.
Yeah, that was my worst fear at the time. Like, just don't fall down.
Knowing what it's like, anything wet sticking to metal in North American winters.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I had legitimate concerns.
Yes, those were legitimate concerns, especially if you were already covered in sweat.
Yeah, it was pretty funny.
But
And one of the coolest things that I learned in that capacity was how much you actually off gas. It was really amazing because the amount of sweat that we had built up on our bodies, when you exited the structure, you were jettisoning gas off of you. You could see it. It was almost like spraying out of you. The amount of off gassing going on, it was remarkable. You had to keep moving forwards or you would blind yourself in the own cloud you were manufacturing.
wow.
Yeah, it was like some of the science stuff that I experienced, like I shouldn't say science, like the physics of being there. You would experience very peculiar things. So that was one of the things that we would get to witness. Sublimation is an interesting thing that you don't get to see all the time. At the South Pole, you can play with it every single day. You could take a big, giant, huge block of ice, snow, whatever you want to call it, from outside. And first of all, it's not even heavy because it's a different density because of the moisture, lack of moisture in the air. So the ice blocks are very, very light. It's like styrofoam. But you could bring in a big ice block, put it on the ground inside, and it'll never make a puddle.
Never?
No, it's 0% humidity in the atmosphere. Literally 0% humidity. It off
Wouldn't
gases
that
like almost
be-
immediately. It sublimates right before your eyes.
Wouldn't 0% humidity cause nosebleeds and such?
All kinds of terrible physical things happen. It's a very taxing environment. Your skin becomes very paper thin. You don't heal at the same rate that you do in the regular world because of the atmosphere and the lack of oxygen in that atmosphere. Eventually, you deplete your own body's oxygen content, and that inhibits your ability to heal at the right rates.
Why is there a lack of oxygen there?
Altitude, it's 9,300 feet of elevation.
Oh, okay. I
That'll
didn't
do it.
realize it was that high.
Yeah, no worries. Yes, the South Pole Station is actually at 9,300 feet of elevation, but because of the other physiological conditions, they don't actually just discuss it in actual. They discuss it in what they call physioaltitude. So there's other things going on atmospherically that make it feel worse than actual altitude. So
it's worse than Mars because Mars was basically like 7,000 feet.
fair enough. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so our physioaltitude was we would have a scroll up in the galley where we would eat and stuff like that, or you can pull it up on a monitor if you wanted to check things out. But once you got acclimated, you kind of knew the hard days, and you would normally just go to the galley, look at the scroll to confirm, and it would give you a physioaltitude reading. And on a good day, you'd be down at on a really good day, you'd be at like 10.1 or 2 or 3 or something like that. Would be a nice, easier day. But if you had a physioaltitude that was hitting like 10.9 and now you're pushing like 11, then you're having a really hard day at work on those days.
I bet.
Yeah.
So you want to tell the folks what your job there was?
Sure. I was originally contracted for my summer season at the South Pole Station to be a plumber. And during my summer season, I gained a second contract to carry on for the winter season. And my contract for that was also plumber, but technically I was doing the job of what they call the utilities technician, which was basically just fixing all of the systems, anything that goes wrong. I mean, I'm at the South Pole, it's the winter time, and I'm on the team of the most qualified people to fix it. So that's what I did. Like, there was a bunch of us there, and if stuff broke, we fixed it. And I had the heavy plumbing expertise for the team. So we would basically just prioritize a brain on a task based on who had the most previous expertise before getting to pole, and then everybody would line up and follow suit and help that person and do what they had to do. If it was a carpentry issue, we'd have a carp guy that would be taking the lead on the job, and we would all fall in suit and help that guy out and get his job done. If he needed the extra hands, or we can get back onto what we were doing. Basically, the day dictated the tasking, and the skill set would just be respected that was needed more often than not. You know, sometimes people get their feathers ruffled too, and, you know, arguments happen as well. But that's the agenda. That was the plan on a good day. Everybody got along and played nice, and things got fixed, right?
Yeah, I understand that. It doesn't seem to matter where we are. We have egos, and we have feelings, and sometimes they get in the way.
It happens. And as far as I was concerned, they were absolutely doing some social studies.
You want to explain that?
Well, it's just, I mean, it's like I've been in and out of these programs a bit, right? So I know
Yeah.
They want a return on their investment, and they will cash out on something 6 ways from Sunday if they can. Right?
So there were also studies on how y'all were reacting to one another.
Absolutely. In the library at the South Pole Station, there's a bookcase, and in that bookcase, there are some books that only exist in that bookcase on this planet.
Really?
Yeah, it's a really cool bookcase. And one of the things they have in there is all of the South Pole winter over psychological research studies from the first season, 1957, up until 1994.
And you were there what year?
I was there in 2010 through 11, and I inquired, and they said they stopped doing that years ago. They don't do that stuff anymore. And I said, did you read what was in there? Well, no, they told me we don't do that anymore. I said, yeah, but that's what's going on right now.
We're on radio. If you're gonna laugh, you have
Yeah,
to make
I'm sorry,
noise.
but that's what was going on. You know, I was like, hold on a second, look at this page. That happened the other day. Is it something going on here? I'm telling you. It was hilarious. I had a lot of issues with the HR folks there. I forgot about that.
Did they label you as a paranoid?
No, they just scheduled Monday morning meetings for me. Well, I should say I did that. I said, enough with this baloney. I said, I'll just meet you Monday morning. Find out what's going on. I scheduled my own. There was nothing better to do that winter. There's only 49 people in 8 months to get through, you know, so you figure you might as well let everybody do their job to the best of their ability during that time period. We had to keep the HR girl well exercised, I guess.
49 people in all kinds of disciplines.
Oh, yes. In a vast array of disciplines. It was pretty much a cross-sectional life.
Are you at liberty to describe some of the projects?
Oh, absolutely. There was the Atmospheric Research Observatory, known as ARROW, and they were studying the atmosphere. That was in one quadrant of our land, I guess you would say. There was the elevated station was the main facility, but then about it on the property, so to say, were other buildings and science facilities. So Arrow was one of them. That was in one corner of the property. Then we had in another area, we had what was commonly referred to as the dark sector. And we had MAPO, which was an off-Earth mapping project of this cosmos. We also had the South Pole Telescope on a similar and conjoined mission, I guess. The South Pole Telescope was really cool science. And then also in the dark sector was the ice cube neutrino detector, which is a very fascinating item that I spent a lot of time working in and around those scientists, and I had a lot of questions, and I got a great education on that device. The South Pole Telescope was also fun to work on. I did an overhaul on that unit in 2010. I was part of a team, and we did a bearing replacement was the task. And from what I was told, never in the history of the world was the task done the way that we did it. Normally, they have a larger window of time to do such a task.
Okay.
So they just disassemble the telescope completely from the top all the way down to where the bearing is, replace the bearing, and then rebuild the telescope. We don't have a window to do that. So we jacked it up. We separated it where the bearing is, and we had to jack up the upper end of the telescope, which the combined weight of all the steel structure and everything was in the ballpark of 450,000 pounds was my recollection. And
Wow.
that had never been done like that before. And I was working with the plumbing team and helping with the welders and stuff like that. And it was a really cool feat. I mean, it is fun to do a task that no one's ever really done before. You have a plan, but you're figuring it out as you go. And then when you pull it off, and like, I mean, when's the next time someone's going to do that? You know? So it's kind of cool. That was the fun part. Like the tasking there, I would say was really fun. As far as a craftsman goes, it's an environment where you really get to test your skills. And I'm a big fan of that. I really enjoy the challenges of overcoming obstacles in my trade and the environment and the rough conditions, and just getting stuff done and getting it fired up and making it work, or putting it back together after some catastrophic failure when, you know, it looks hopeless. I mean, I get some people have a quitter's mentality. It happens, but you have to fix stuff. And in certain environments, failure is not an option. And some people have that mentality and some don't. Some people can winter at South Pole and some can't. It's just that simple. I happen to enjoy rising to the challenges that occurred there. More often than not, it was a pretty mundane, boring day. You know, day-to-day operations were pretty mundane. But when the alarms went off, things got really important, and you had to do what you had to do, and you had to do it quickly and correctly. I mean, that was it. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it.
So can you walk us through a typical mundane day?
Yeah, it would be checking the scroll for wind conditions and temperature. You would kind of already know the atmospheric condition. Like I said, you would get acclimated and you can kind of feel that in your lungs. But you would want to check predicted wind speeds and stuff like that, because I knew that I'd have to gear up to go outside. And yeah, it's pretty interesting. I guess I think if I remember correctly, I had about 14 pieces of headgear that I'd have to put on, in addition to my other layering and stuff like that. But I'd usually go and check the outbuildings would be one of the first things that I would do. All these dark sector buildings, Arrow. We also had what we would call rod wells, which was our water supplies. We had other ice tunnels underneath that would have to get inspected. We would have certain facilities from the summer camp that were shut down, certain items that were maintained. So a fistful of places that I would have to go meander in some pretty harsh conditions. So I would find out, is it, you know, minus 80 degrees ambient with a 30 knot wind, what direction, what's the prediction for, is it going to change, is it stable? That was a big thing for me, was just getting my gear and my bag ready for where I was going for the day, because I would need to bring emergency food, emergency water, backup radio. Anytime I exited the elevated station, I had to be prepared for the possibility that I might get lost or disconnected and have to hold up somewhere. And we had different plans for this, and we had structures that I could bail into if I had to hold out for a storm or, you know, whatever, got hurt. You know, I might get hurt when I'm out there, and not be able to make it all the way back and have to go to a warm-up hut or something like that and call for help. So these are all things that we had to plan for, deal with, train for. So in my day, I'm gearing up and exiting the building, and presumably I have all the right gear with me. And
Was there someone inside who was like assigned to be the buddy?
yes, absolutely. We had someone that we had to call out to, and it was our work order scheduler at the time. And we would call out and identify that we were exiting the building. We would give a location that we were headed to and an ETA for return. And then that person would keep tabs on the people exiting the building, like almost like flight following. And then that way, if somebody was overdue, then we could call, find out what the problem is. And if need be, we could send out an emergency response team, could be dispatched, and the person could be rescued. And we trained for that regularly. I'm trying to think if we had someone get lost in our winter season. I know I almost got lost a couple of times. I'm trying to think if we actually had a drill team fired up for an actual lost person. I can't recall that one off the top of my head. I don't think that we had someone get lost that we had to go find. I know we trained for it a lot, and I know a couple of times I was thoroughly concerned that I was actually getting lost, but I wound up making it.
Well, I'm glad you made it.
Me too. I'm sure they would have found me. I'm certain they would have found me.
Okay, in the wintertime, there's no sunlight at all through most of it?
That is correct. Not a bit. The South Pole Station has one day celestially over the course of a year, and like 365 days it takes for the sun to go up and down once, one sun cycle at the South Pole. The rest of the time, it's just moving around you. So it moves around the horizon, and then eventually it works its way up. So December 21st, winter solstice, is just circling over you, and then it does the reverse and comes back down and then drops under the horizon for the entirety of the winter. It's just gone. That's night. So basically you have 4 months of pitch black, you have 4 months of pure sun, and then you have the 2 seasons in between that are a mix. But
Okay. I wanted to make sure that was clear to our audience.
oh yeah, it was dark. That was another perk as well, was the winter time, because we're at 9,300 feet of elevation, to look around, if you can get away from the facility of buildings and look away, everything's downhill, and there's no mountains, no obstructions. So if there's no clouds and no sun, you just simply lift your head up a little bit over the horizon, and at that point, everything on planet Earth drops out from view 100%, and there's no difference from you being in space or not.
Wow.
It's really pretty. And the density of the stars and what you can see there, I mean, I don't know how to explain that to anyone, and I don't know that it could look any different or better from space. It was really gorgeous.
That I believe, yeah, with a lot less atmosphere and absolute stark dark, yeah, it would be amazing.
Mm-hmm. And that's basically why they had the South Pole telescope located there, because of the atmospheric conditions. It is so thin, it does allow for these devices to work with much greater precision due to all the lack of atmosphere and light. A lot of it has to do with light. They get a lot of light intrusion in other places.
I live in one of those rural areas in a small village, around 3,000 people, and some of those I think are pets. But we have so much light pollution, and even at 1,400 feet, there's still a lot of weather above us. So sometimes seeing the stars at all is impossible.
Mm-hmm.
So I can I'm a little bit jealous.
Yeah, it was really something else. And then the auroras, I was just talking, I was on Full Spectrum Universe the other day with Rob, really nice guy. And
Rob is a nice guy. I like him a lot.
we were talking about the auroras, and I had explained to him, I said, it's really unfortunate. I mean, I've seen the aurora australis in the wintertime at the South Pole, and yes, it is beyond beautiful and beyond description. It's also beyond the camera. I don't know if people really truly understand that. But when you sit there and you actually look at an aurora in real life, the camera does no justice to what you are witnessing. And I know from the folks that I was there with at South Pole that, yes, they could figure out how to manipulate the camera to get a shot. But then what you see, I mean, I've seen the picture of what I was looking at, and I can tell you that the picture sucks compared to reality. It's just like a washout. You have to leave the camera lens open in that environment to absorb enough light from that you're trying to get, which is the aurora. But then what happens is it makes it look darker than it really is in reality, because you need to get that light to get a contrast in the background. So it's very unnatural looking. And it takes away all of the life of the aurora, because in reality, there's no stillness to it whatsoever. An aurora is like alive. It's like an energy. It's making noise, lots of it. It's sizzling, it's crackling, and all of that noise and all of that motion, when you're looking at it, it's like, I was just going to say straight in the face. It really has a life to it. And it seems to me almost like a photo of the aurora australis is not indicative at all of what I saw.
Yeah. I've been told that the colors we see in the photographs are not what you see, that what the eye sees is usually a white color. Now, is that true or not?
Coloring is true. That white is one of the more common colors, but you can see different colors. I've seen purples, greens, reds, whites. You can totally see colors in the auroras, but it's like there's really like a motion, like an ocean. There's like a flow and a movement and different densities and stuff going on. And to take photos or video of it, you're really bastardizing reality through that medium just to capture it.
Okay.
It doesn't do it justice.
Well, that's good to know. I've never seen any aurora real life. I live too far south to get the aurora borealis.
My favorite part was the noise, actually. It was almost like, it was electrical. It was some sort of sizzling. It was like almost a static electricity in a way, but it had, like when you're listening to a stereo and you hear like the when you first turn it on and it's like really loud, but there's nothing playing yet. It's just like that.
Yeah.
But you can still feel it like going through you, like the music's about to kick on. That's like what the aurora was. It was like it would make this sizzling and cracking sound, but you could also like feel it. Like it was like you could be like walking sometimes and you would hear it first before you saw it, and it was almost like it was like calling out to you, like, oh, where is that? I hear it. I hear the sizzling. There's an aurora around, and you would go like looking for it, and then you'd look over and there it is. It's over there. I knew I heard one. But they were pretty common. I thought they were fantastic. There was an occasion one time we had arches that go into big giant Quonset hut arches, like big corrugated steel tunnels that go into the ice. But we have parts that we maintained an exterior door and garages and things like that to be able to get in and out of the tunnel. But over the course of the winter time, the snow accumulations accrete over the roof line and make these big, huge snow cornices hanging over the edge that could now fall down and kill someone. So we have to basically cut them off and drop them in a safe fashion. That's one of the tasks we had to do one day. So we manufactured our snow cornice saw, which we figured out by using big lengths of rope, and we tied knots in the rope. and we put people up top at a safe distance and people far away at a safe distance, and we pulled the rope back and forth across the roof line and cut the snow cornice off, and it worked out really well. But in that task, we were all outside, and an aurora started, and it was one of the strongest ones that I had seen the entire time that I was there. So again, considering we were at the legitimate geographical South Pole, we were looking up at a complete ring around the pole of green aurora. And it was a very thick band, and it had like some spinning going to it. But we all laid down. We all stopped our task. We were like, hold on, we got to watch this. We all put down our tools. We all laid down on our backs at probably minus 80 some odd degrees ambient. And we all just were looking up at the sky because it was freaking gorgeous. This giant green ring that looked like flames in a way. It was like green flames churning around. And then at times it would look like from one side, as if we were calling it charging up. We were like, oh, look, it's charging up. It was like energy was pouring into one side of the ring, and you would see like increased activity in the churniness of it as this was happening. Yeah. And we're all like oohing and ahhing and stuff. And then it would do that for a while, like it was charging up, and then the entry of more energy would like cease, and it would like go crazy for a while, and then all of a sudden it would like discharge out 180 degrees opposite from where it had entered on the other side of the ring. After a while it would like exhaust out, and then the ring would settle down for a while, and then it would start to charge up again. And we would see this happening. We'd be like, it's doing it again. It's charging up again. And we would just keep watching this happen. And, you know, it was really cool. And then, you know, finally we said, we're probably going to freeze to death. We should go back inside.
Yeah. Minus 80 degrees while you're doing this. Yes.
Yeah.
Was that centigrade or Fahrenheit?
That was Fahrenheit.
Okay.
Yep. They did have readings for both. There was more Americans than non-Americans, so we typically functioned in Fahrenheit. But I mean, at those numbers, it's almost like it's almost 6 and 1/2 a dozen of another. And also, too, there are points that we function in that the rest of the world doesn't really function in, that are actually in close proximity, because a lot of folks don't know that the centigrade and Fahrenheit scales cross at minus 40.
Yeah.
So when you're teetering near minus 40, they're pretty close. And we teeter near minus 40 regularly there, so.
That's like being normal.
Yes, what we don't do is ever say negative. It's inherent. When you're giving the temperature, it's just your brain thinks the other way. 90's freezing. But we don't waste our time saying negative. It was negative every day I was there. The hottest day I saw was 5 in South Pole terms. Normies would say minus 5.
Yeah. I deal with a lot of folks that are not Americans in my social media. Mm-hmm. And I get a lot of ribbing about Fahrenheit. Mm-hmm. So some of it's good-natured and some of it's not.
That happens. It's all good. I imagine their country's probably in lockdown right now.
It is. Very much
wow,
so.
Sucks to be them.
My county is threatening lockdown because we've had a whole 8 people die from the bug in, what is it, 10 months?
Well, eventually people will get their heads out of their butts and realize they're giving away all of their rights.
Yeah. Well, I hope you're right about that. I'm seeing more and more folks running around without masks, but
that's good.
We know at least one of the 8 people in our county who died actually died of cancer, and they blamed it on the bug. So,
Well, let's not ruin a perfectly good conversation with propaganda story pieces that have been forced upon us.
yes, sir. Okay. What do you want to talk about next?
Let's see.
I mean, you were there for a year, so you should have lots of stories.
Yeah, I think, geez. Well, you had asked before about the day in the life, and I had made it to the door.
Okay.
So I would normally have to jump out that way. Dark sector was usually the furthest walk out. Actually, the ice cube neutrino detector would be one of the places that would be hardest to get to, and one of my favorites actually, because it was a challenging walk, and a really cool facility, and it was actually an easy inspection too. So the task had way more to do with getting there and back, which was again more of the fun challenges. But going out to the dark sector, I would shoot over to the MAPO facility, and there was an operator inside that place who currently I think at the time, I think he lost it for a little bit, but now he regained it. He has the record for the most winter overs at the South Pole Station in the history of the world. And he's up at like 15 now. So he's a madman, and he knows everything there is to know about South Pole Station. And he was one of the first places that I would have to stop in the dark sector and check his facility, ask him if he was having any troubles with anything, go over stuff. Next one was the South Pole Telescope. Same thing. There was an operator in there who had been in the program for quite a few years. That telescope was basically his baby. Dana, good guy, really smart, and he was hunting for new galaxies and you name it, and he was finding them all the time. People really have no idea how much we've learned on this planet that has not been disseminated. That was one of the things that I learned. I've been working in government programs now for solid 10 years, in research programs from South Pole Station to Barrow, Alaska. I mean, from the bottom of the world to the top of the world. It really saddens me to let you guys know that you are investing a lot of money that you're not getting a return on. And worse off, you're getting lied to all the time too. But don't believe me.
I was aware of that. A lot of the folks listening may not be. There are all of the trillions of dollars in the Pentagon's budget that they can't account for. It all goes to Black Ops. And the entire space program is one of those Black Ops.
Go to the University of Wisconsin and look up the Ice Cube Neutrino Detector Project. It's run through them. Look how much money has been invested in that program. I believe it's to the tune of, well, this was 10 years ago when they were turning it on, actually. That's another thing, too. I was there for the switching on of that. When they went from construction to firing it up, operations and maintenance, I was there. That was part of my team.
Do you know what it does?
I know many things it can do.
Are you wanting to talk about that?
I'm working on that, I will say. I am working on that. It's like many systems that the government funds. It will certainly do the thing that it is presented to do, and it can certainly do something else at least. And I would suggest that it's very worthy equipment of study. I'm studying it myself. I don't want to fire off half-cocked on certain statements. But again, anybody else who wants to study the Ice Cube Neutrino Detector and the University of Wisconsin and all the money going into that facility, join me. If you find something out that you think is interesting, I think it's a very interesting facility. Neutrinos are interesting. Even the science behind this stuff. Even if you just start with what's the presented science, a lot of people don't really know what's going on and what a neutrino is and why they're doing this science. We could start with that. I mean, a neutrino is a near massless particle moving at, or I should say moving close to, at, or beyond the speed of light was what they were considering when I was present at the facility. And that's what they were looking for. They have now confirmed this. So it's awesome. But what neutrinos do with that telescope is they go flying through the ice. I'm sorry, at the detector. They go flying through that ice. And when a neutrino contacts the nucleus of an ice molecule, it breaks apart the nucleus and creates a new molecule, I guess you would say, known as a muon. And it also expels in that moment a flash of blue light. So the detector, they have these things called the DOMs, digital optical monitors, these basketball-sized circuit board sensor thingies that they have strewn all through the ice, thousands of them through miles of ice depth and all kinds of stuff. It's a huge, huge, huge array set up in the ice. Huge, massive.
Do you have some idea of the numbers for
Thousands.
the numbers of parameters of the size of the place?
Yes, so the depth of, so that they would basically drill a hole in the ice that would go from the surface down about 2 miles. Each one of these holes, they would then drop down a string, a cable, they call it a string. On that cable, at certain intervals, say, I don't know, every 4 or 6 feet or whatever the heck it was, they would have a DOM, say the size of a basketball. Each one of those DOMs is a sensor. Each one of those strings is 2 miles long, and if I was to say that the Ice Cube building was in the center of this array, first and foremost, I love sacred geometry, and I can tell you that the Ice Cube neutrino detector array shape is basically hexagonal, which to me is a very interesting sacred geometry thing for lots of ways. But each of those strings set up in this hexagonal pattern would have been, well, geez. There were hundreds of strings and so many, there was thousands of DOMs. They gave each one a name.
Really?
Yeah, like a name, yeah, there was like certain, like Dom Jimmy, or, you know, Dom.
They gave them names rather than numbers?
It was all across the board. You could have an R2-D2 DOM. You can have a Darth Vader DOM. It was, you know, they were, you know, somebody had to call it something. Some of them had numbers. Some of them had names. And I think the more problematic ones probably had different names. But yeah, so those detectors were looking for these neutrino to muon conversion points. And the idea, I mean, first and foremost, is pretty profound, that they now know things can go faster than the speed of light. Confirmed.
Confirmed. I knew
but
that.
They don't talk about that and what it means to everything in reality.
Yeah, it's proof that relativity is in error, and all of Earth's physics is wrong.
Yep.
And they need to go back and start.
Yep.
Go back to prior to relativity and start again.
In the teasing aspect of stuff, right? I'm not trying to be mean to physicists. It was jovial, and the people I was teasing got it. I would tease these physicists at the South Pole Station. I mean, they're some of the smartest people on the planet. But I would tease them, and I would say, oh, you physicists are worthless. The only thing a physicist can tell me is what they just saw.
Okay.
And they would laugh, because it's kind of true. Like, you know, they're going to change their mind the split second they see something else. It's okay. That's what they do.
It's what they're supposed to do.
Right. So I love when people are like, you can't argue with science, blah, 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 and the physics. Like, bro, physicists don't like their own answers.
When I was taking physics in the 80s at San Diego State, they told me that none of it was set in stone, that everything was subject to new information.
Right.
And then I hear people, oh, trust the science. And I'm like, no.
Yep.
I trust the basic science as being basically correct, but as far as details,
Yeah. That was one of the things that I spoke with one of the physicists at the South Pole Station, because when we were, looking out into the cosmos, lest we forget, the physics as presented is we're looking back in time. So it's also a fun consideration when you're standing at the South Pole in the middle of winter out into these star clusters and realizing, technically I'm looking at ancient history.
depending on how far away it is, how ancient it is.
Right, and stuff like that. So I would talk with some of these folks there, and one of the explanations that I was told so I knew what I was being presented was bad information, but I couldn't really explain how. And he gave me a how. He said, this is the way that you're right. So he said, here's the Earth where we're at. It's the epicenter of our perception. He says our science is limited because of our way to observe it. He said, so we look at the cosmos by how far we can observe, and that's limited by light, our observable universe. He said, so we can basically look outwardly, he said, to the distance of about 4.5 billion years, because that's as far as our tools and testing stuff does. So then the light has to go out that far and bounce back for us to functionally perceive. So we limit ourselves by the stuff that's inside that bubble. And we created all of our science based on that fact, everything that's in that bubble that can be perceived. But what science knows is that there's stuff outside the bubble. And what science also knows, there's more outside the bubble than inside the bubble. So simple logic dictates that if you're going to actually try to explain our reality without discussing or adding in the value of anything outside of the bubble, you're wrong.
Yeah.
That's it. Straight up, right off the bat, it's a simple logic. Your answer isn't actually right. It may look that way from inside the bubble. It may function well inside the bubble. But technically, it's not true. Something still else going on. And this would be where in antiquity, before we had the split of a term like alchemy, way back when there was like the study of reality, and that's it. Now we have, like science and religion and, mystery schools and things like that. But way back when, we just basically had like reality and the mystery schools, which dealt in the conversation of things that were mysterious or unknown or unreal or couldn't be observed, but were still respected as being outside of observation, but of value to inside this bubble. At least some sort of conversation would have to occur about the unknown.
And today's science just leaves all of that unknown completely out of the equation.
They do not even want to discuss that it exists at all. They want to operate inside that 4.5 billion year bubble. All of their information comes from inside of that. And it describes inside the bubble really well. But that would be like a fish being in the fish tank and then trying to describe what's going on around the block.
Everything in the fish bowl that they can measure.
Right. Yep.
Because there are things in the fish bowl that can't be measured.
Right. Yes, because there's still more unknown than known. And yet here we are constantly discussing reality. what can be known without even first admitting there's an unknown. Like, that's insane.
Well, the physics that I was taught in the 80s was mostly based on Newton. There was some mention of relativity, and there was discussion about quantum mechanics, and there was discussion about the then new membrane theory. And so the membrane theory was an attempt to explain what was outside the bubble, because they had noticed discrepancies between their view of reality and what they could measure. And the math didn't add up. So I sat through one lecture where the professor sat there and said, well, what's happened is the physicists have climbed the mountain and found the gurus sitting there already. And this was in 1982. So how far have they gotten in the almost 40 years since?
Yeah. And again, back to covered up sciences and programs and stuff like that, you know, folks like Ingo Swann and stuff and the government had to have some pretty interesting conversations back in the day about what reality is, right?
Folks like Ingo Swann are part of the monkey wrench in measuring the bubble. And yet even Ingo Swann said that once they know you're capable of this, that they'll never let you go, that they will completely wear you out. So,
that's what they like doing. But I think, I don't know, I feel like tides are changing at the moment. I do feel like there's a grander energy of folks paying attention and waking up to at least engaging conversations that they wouldn't have had previously.
Well, that makes sense to me. I mean, I have a whole show doing that.
Yeah. But you see more and more people, I think, in their day-to-day lives, I think, engaging each other in topics that would have been previously like rather verboten, and now they're, you know, jumping into them with a little bit more zeal. I think folks are starting to realize they've been a bit more deceived than they previously paid attention to.
Well, I haven't seen that in my, shall we call it, real world life.
Oh, okay.
As opposed to cyber.
Okay.
I live in a small town. I live in an apartment complex, and most of the people here are still watching network news.
Okay,
And
that's unfortunate.
that is their complete reality. And when the TikTok video was shown on network news a year and a half ago, that was when they showed an interest for all of half a day. They were terrified. I mean, seriously, they were terrified because network news said that ET was real and showed a video and said, the Pentagon has verified this is real. And I told them those beings have been here for hundreds, if not thousands of years, and you're okay.
This is the sham.
And they said, oh, okay, and went back to their work during the week and party all weekend. So
Yep. It's unfortunate that they just believe what comes out of the boob tube. This is part of my frustration. You know, I spent a year down at the South Pole Station, and I learned very much that there is not a problem with global warming in Antarctica. Trust me, I was there. That's how this works. People say, well, if somebody knew something, they would say something. Yeah, you're getting lied to. I'm telling you, I was there. And in 2010, the science was everything's cool and getting cooler and colder. And if you go check the numbers yourself, like I mentioned earlier, the negative minus 100 ambient temperature that prior to my arrival wasn't happening all the time. has been happening more and more since I left because it's getting colder and colder. Those are the facts. Everybody in Antarctica laughs hearing about the global warming stuff off ice because everyone's just getting lied to. But because I don't get to pay for the news to get produced or the research to go out there, no one listens to the plumber that was there. They listen to the, the Rockefeller-funded History Channel show that has an agenda base that wants to say, a glacier broke off the ice in Antarctica, so global warming's the problem. It's getting warmer, and that's a lie. It's getting colder. The ice is accumulating more, but because the mechanics of the ice, when it goes out over the water and grows and grows and grows and grows and grows because it's getting colder and growing, then eventually it can't support itself anymore and it snaps off, and that's natural. That's part of the process of a growing glacier that's healthy. It is not the negative impact of global warming like everyone's being lied to.
Next question. Since you were in the middle of Antarctica, is it a continent or is it a ice shelf around a flat Earth?
Well, I would love for any flat earthen person to talk to me because the planet is round. I've pretty much flown around most of it. I've been at the South Pole Station for an entire Sunday cycle. So, I mean, it is what it is. It doesn't do anything the flat earth people say. And anybody, I mean, literally anybody can wake up on any given day and not have to deal with a flat earther because you can just ask them what time it is and the sun is up and then ask them if the sun is up on the entire planet. No? Okay, then it ain't flat. Good night.
I just thought I would toss that out there
I
because
know.
you were there.
Yeah, the Earth's round. I hate to let people know the truth.
I've seen it from space, and yes, it's round. So actually, it's kind of a lumpy potato-looking thing.
As far as I am concerned, the entire flat Earth movement is a CIA psyop that got pushed into the truth community, whatever you want to call it, the searchers. It was some BS to derail people and make them look like buffoons. That's all it is.
That's what I thought it was from the get-go, and said so, and a lot of people have been quite hostile.
Yeah.
I was surprised by how quickly it made the rounds. I've been surprised by how quickly certain other things have made the rounds that were just as much psyops. And watching the ignorance and gullibility has been quite frustrating for me.
Yeah. There's a little known faction in our history. I believe you've heard of them. But this is very referenceable, and everyone should actually become familiar with the term COINTELPRO. 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 Learn the history of your country.
Yeah.
This is a big deal. Way back when, COINTELPRO, I believe, was operating out of a desk of the FBI, technically. But what they were doing was infiltrating. I'm paraphrasing, but this is according to their paperwork that was found. Their intentions were to infiltrate everything, every argument. It doesn't really matter if you were pro-war or against the war. They would infiltrate both sides. If you were pro-choice or pro-life, they infiltrate both sides. This is what they do. They get into every conversation and weasel their way in to the point of running the conversation.
Their intention was to close off discussion at the extremes on every topic.
Yes, to provide margins, basically, is the way that I looked at it.
Yeah.
Is that if as long as you're within the margins, they'll control the conversation up to here and up to here, and then, anything outside of that side is crazy, anything outside that side is crazy.
Yeah. As long as you're within the margins, you're okay. And I'm seeing that is the agenda now on the major social media sites, is to narrow the margins. And the margins are getting narrower by the day.
Yes.
It's getting more and more difficult to stay online because of this. I am almost by definition out there in beyond the margins, and yet I'm trying really hard to speak my truth and yet keep an online presence so that people have access to me. And you know, I'll be honest, I'm moving to MeWe because Facebook is too difficult to deal with.
Yep.
I've had a presence on MeWe and on Discord since almost 2 years ago when Facebook permabanned me. And I did come back to Facebook because it's a place to share my radio show and have pages and talk about my website. But I cannot be honest on Facebook and stay there.
Right.
And we still don't know why they booted you.
And you know what? I'm not even looking back. You know, it is what it is. I'm a person that often says vote with your dollar. So I'm going to MeWe because MeWe supports my mindset at this point. And I don't support what Facebook's mindset is, so I can't vote with my dollar. I'm not going to fight my way to get back into a situation that I don't support. I recommend people leave Facebook. I recommend going to MeWe. I'm over there as well, and it's a breath of fresh air to not have to deal with the BS that is Facebook.
Exactly. I have not been challenged even once by MeWe. And it's frustrating. There are joke memes that are being fact-checked. I had a pointed joke meme, and it was obviously a Photoshop job. And almost all memes are. Seriously. And I mean, that's how you make them. And that was what Facebook's fact check decided to call it was, well, this was photoshopped. So they put their thing over the front of it and said, not true. And I'm like, come on, guys, get a sense of humor. You know, it had 3 stars from the 1960s and 70s sitting together, and the records don't show that they ever actually met. And it says, you think you're cool, you're not as cool as these guys.
Oh my God.
Facebook had to fact check that.
Well, this is the world that people can choose to be in. If that's the way that they want to vote with their dollars, if to them that type of censorship is appropriate, then they deserve it. Enjoy. I think people really need to start stepping up and doing more. I was watching something with Mark Passio recently. Geez, it took me a while. It was like 8.5 hours. He did a talk on natural law. And
that is one of the best videos I have ever seen. And yes, it is incredibly long, and it's worth every minute of it.
It is worth every minute of it. I can't wait to watch it again. And one of the things that Mark Passio brings up, and I support this 100%, we need this in this world now. A lot of the stuff he says we need in the world right now, which is pretty interesting. Go watch his video. I'll try to link it when I put this one up. But he states that right thought is, you know, principle, for sure. Very important to be of right thought. But really think about it. What's the value of right thought that is not followed by right action?
None.
I agree. That was kind of what he was putting up as well. So he is basically saying that if you have a right thought, you need to go to right action, because in a way, if you don't have a right action to follow your right thought, I really don't care what your thought is then.
It's his discussion is about restoring your personal sovereignty and doing this through right thought, right action, and in the integrity of being a whole person doing this.
Fair enough.
And because he comes from the background of having been in Church of Satan, so many people listen to him and completely freak out.
Yes.
But if you listen to what he says, he makes perfect sense.
And if you ever want to understand your enemy, he will give you very good insight into who your enemies are.
And how they think and how they are operating and what you have to deal with.
Yes, he also clarifies.
They believe it.
Exactly what I was just thinking. It's not a matter of what you and I believe in the battlefield, so to say. If your enemy believes something, is acting on something a certain way, you need to know that.
Yes.
You know?
That's actionable intel.
Yes, and action being a big part of his speech, and where I was going to bring this up was that today, this is what the world needs now. This is the direction that I'm going to be pumping hard. It is one thing to be of right thought. Every single person I meet seems to be able to tell me what they think is right. But then they tell me that what they think is right is what other people should be doing.
No,
I never catch them in the middle of doing the thing that they say is right. So I'm going to start challenging people to start doing something right. I'm less interested in what you have to say. I'm very interested in what you're going to do. And I want to support people in right action. I'm very interested in that. It does mean that you first have to have right thought, but it does mean that if you're not going to bring the conversation to action, I feel like you're just going to be wasting a lot of people's time. And I want people's brains to go in that way, because if you're seeing people just thinking, and if you're catching yourself just thinking, if you're not acting, you're not accomplishing anything. And this is not the battlefield environment for you to be getting caught flat-footed and just reacting to the actions of those around you that are aware that you're just sitting on your thumbs.
Yeah, I've been.
And I don't mean you, Penny, like you directly. I'm being figurative.
I know that. I've been looking at what I'm doing, and I keep being hit up with people who have no clue what I'm talking about. They get the deer in the headlights look.
Mm-hmm.
You've seen that expression. And then they ask me what to do.
Mm-hmm.
And I give them baby steps because that's all they're capable of.
Mm-hmm.
And then they think, well, Penny said this was all we had to do. And you've heard that out of their own mouths.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I have a new answer for this when people say, what do you think I should do? My first answer is stop asking other people what to do. Stop letting other people tell you what to do. Figure out what you think the right thing is to do and do it immediately.
Yeah, don't sit and think yourself out of it.
Right. Do it immediately. If it's working, good. If it's not working, come up with a better idea. But don't waste your time thinking about the perfect plan and asking someone else what the perfect plan is. No one has the perfect plan for you. I can assure you of that, because anyone who wants to ask for the perfect plan and doesn't have one, and you're going to admit it, contact me. Go to DecipheringMe369@gmail, and then do what I say. Because if you want to look for what other people are telling you to do, then let me tell you what to do. And if you don't want to do what I want to tell you to do, then don't let anybody else tell you what to do either. And figure out what you want to do. So many people nowadays listening to other people tell them what to do is driving me bonkers.
Yeah, I have a lot of people trying to tell me what to do. And I'm like, excuse me,
Mm-hmm.
Who died and left you in charge?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like, and what's and not for nothing, like my response is like, what's stopping you from doing it? If you believe that this is so important, I'm simply just going to agree with you and say, do it. That's more like, I think that's what frustrates people when they deal with me more often, is that I challenge them to do the things they said that they were intending to do.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, okay, sounds good, do it. Oh, how come you're not doing it? Well, how dare you tell me to do that? I didn't tell you to do it. You said you were going to do it.
Yeah, I'm starting with the pressure on Congress to investigate the CIA, because Congress has authority over the CIA
Mm-hmm.
if they have the will to do it. So I'm putting pressure on them so that they'll have the will.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't mean that's the only thing I'm doing,
Mm-hmm.
or that that's the only thing anyone can do.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But short of advocating things that might be illegal, this is something that can be done by anyone, anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Because even if they're not American citizens, they can still put pressure on Congress.
Mm-hmm.
So
And
this is something nice, easy, anybody can do it.
mm-hmm. Knowledge is power. Sharing it matters, right? Here's another thing
Yes.
that's, with what's going on in the world and the community. I can go to YouTube and I can look at the videos that are being pumped around the mainstream, and it blows my mind, the junk that people are watching, the insane things that, I mean, it is what it is. To each their own. But there's content creators that have, I don't know, 86,000 subscribers, and 4 minutes after they put up a YouTube video of them like petting their cat or something, they get like 500,000 views.
Yeah.
This is where people's attention is. So I'm going to straight up tell people, you need to start helping. If you want this information to go around, you say, what should we do? You should spend an hour a day sharing the information that you're interested in and making sure it gets around the internet. Because there is a data war going on right now. And as Penny said earlier, there are forces trying to strap down and tighten up these margins. So you want to know what to do? Share, like, and subscribe. Do that all day long, or whatever prescribed time for you to do it. But since you asked, people ask, what can we do? Like, share, and subscribe. Move the information around for the content creators that you want to remain, because someone's trying to make them go away.
This community, Super Soldiers, Secret Space Program, Black Ops Whistleblowers, is being clamped down on by the same social media who are tightening the edges. And we are no longer found in search engines.
Correct.
And people need to know this. We talked about PSYOPs earlier. One of the biggest PSYOPs in our community is the infiltration of religion into our experiences. Now, I understand that if you have been through serious trauma, you might have trouble looking at that trauma without the comfort of your faith. That I can understand, okay? But I have recently had people tell me that there are only angels, humans, and demons, that extraterrestrials in physical bodies are not real, simply because they've never experienced them.
And it is certainly possible that people could simply have different perspectives, and that exists as well. But I would add to the mix that I also believe that there are frauds, like COINTELPRO operators, that would
Yes.
come in under the banner of being a religious zealot for the purposes of being disruptive in a community like ours, because they get to, you know, Bible thump their way through the conversation for the purposes of being disruptive. They're not actually religious zealots. They're just wearing the uniform because it's
There's a lot of
convenient.
those too. There are a lot of folks who think that we are playing some sort of a game, and they hop into the conversation thinking it's a game that we're playing because a certain former person on Gaia, and I'm not going to dignify him by giving his name, whenever a new person comes forward who is telling legitimate truth, this person will label them a LARPer, live action role play. And he has blasted several people in the community, some of whom have left because of the pushback.
Mm.
And at that point, he has become COINTELPRO.
I mean, it's, you know, not for nothing, kind of one of the reasons I kind of got into this community was I have been places. So there's certain people's stories that I know they're telling the truth, and there's certain people's stories that I know they're full of beans. And this particular character cracks me up because I think it's hilarious that he gets to be the authority on who's a LARPer.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, I'm sorry, but from my perspective, what does he think I think of him? I've yet to see a photograph of his time at Pole. I don't remember him being there when I was there. I mean, I could simply say all the things that he said too. Oh, well, I was underneath. Well, I was underneath too, but I didn't see you there. Oh, but it was 2 miles. I was at the 2 mile hole, bro. I didn't see you there. You know, so I get it. I mean, it's fun to show up somewhere and say that guy's a liar because you're lying. I mean, I think Hitler did something similar to the Reichstag building. When he burned it down, he blamed his opponents.
Exactly.
Like, it is possible to show up to a room first and lie first, and then force everybody else to do the work to prove you wrong. I believe that was very much a Hitler tactic also. You know, is that he knew that the people
I'm glad you're saying this instead of me.
they'll believe
was,
the lie, they'll believe the thing they're told first, no matter what it is.
Yeah, they do.
And then when you present them the truth, they'll attack it and make you prove that. It's one of the oldest tricks in the book, actually. So,
and it's very prevalent in our community.
it is that the people who have the least amount of evidence are calling for the greatest.
Yeah.
It's pretty funny. I'm certain the next time that I go to the South Pole Station, I will have a camera and I'll take pictures.
Well, you have.
And I'm certain that every time I go to another facility where I'm not supposed to, I'm going to do it again because I have lots of pictures and lots of video from places that I wasn't supposed to.
Yeah, I've seen boxes of papers and photos at your house.
And I have a few documents too.
Yeah, reams and reams and reams of documents.
But it's all good. I mean, everybody has basically made their bed at this point in many capacities in our environment as of late. So things are going to get really interesting because at some point, the last shoe will fall. And there's going to be cards dropped on the table. Everybody's going to see everybody's hand, and it's going to get really interesting really fast.
On one of the videos I'd recently done, there were comments saying that I was fake because I was still alive.
and that, I'm sorry, but not for nothing. What's the value of the person making that statement? What's the veracity of that statement to cause me to give it credence? Just because the person said it? There's no logic inherent in the statement. Just making the statement doesn't make it true. just because they can't figure out, because they lack the imagination to figure out why you're alive, doesn't limit reality from letting you live. This is where a lot of people, sorry, just because you can't think of a reason for something, just because your imagination, your intellect can't ascertain something, doesn't make it not happening. That's logic.
Well, I have been shot with different energy weapons 10 times.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll tell you, they hurt, and it takes about 6 weeks to heal up.
Mm-hmm.
But there are no visible wounds to take to the doctor. So they're painful. Lou was also hit with me the first time. So I have that witness. But as far as something documented for people to see and touch, nothing.
Yep.
So
And that's kind of why I wanted to.
I have survived all of them. I'm still talking, and that was actually the excuse the CIA gave when they broke my shoulder last year, and was that they had been unable to kill me and had not yet figured out why. But they knew they could make me hurt. So I had surgery a year ago in October to rebuild my left shoulder, and I still can't put it behind my back.
Mm-hmm.
And so for people to say there's no proof that anything has happened to me, they're just not paying attention.
Fair enough. And they're also not worthy of your energy.
Okay.
They're not worthy of your energy technically, because it's not. I get it's enjoyable to bring out information. Yes, I have facts, and I can prove things, and it's helpful to the conversation for sure. For people that are interested in moving the conversation forwards, that's what really matters. So if somebody shows up to the conversation and they're needing proof after proof after proof after proof after proof, they're not helping the conversation. It's just reality. And they can go dig and do more due diligence. It's perfectly fair. But it would be like when I was at the South Pole Station, right? There are certain scientists that are at the cutting edge. They're moving forwards, okay? They don't have time for, like, for example, the ice cube neutrino detector is being run by the University of Wisconsin. So there's people from basically the staff level all the way to the South Pole Station from University of Wisconsin personnel. So the personnel at the South Pole Station doesn't need to be getting questions from the classroom of that level of stuff. They're at the front edge. They're moving forwards. They have very important work to do, and they're in such and such genre. But just because any student might come walking into the room doesn't mean that that scientist needs to peel off what they're doing because so-and-so doesn't understand what's going on in here.
Okay.
So, in a way, I think similar to like what Tony Rodriguez did, he put up some sort of a website where he has this thing that like brings people up to speed, so to say. Because first and foremost, your experience is your experience, and people can either take it or leave it. If they don't see it as a proof, there's really nothing more that you can offer than more of your experience. And that apparently didn't work the first time.
That's true.
So all you can really do is if somebody has questions, which are really criticisms, just redirect them to your previous body of work and save yourself the stress. I mean, what are you going to do? Just repeat yourself ad nauseum in hopes that they someday believe you?
You're right. Okay.
You don't need them to believe you. You have your life. You've done it. And now the question is, what do you do with it?
The question is, what am I doing with what I've done and what I'm in the process of doing? And what I've been doing is trying to create a body of work on this radio station of showing the people I believe to be truthful to a greater audience, with the understanding that we're telling the truth. And we may be telling different aspects of the same truth, but the total picture should be more filled in by each person rather than muddied up. And the public needs to know what's going on. At least a general picture of that there are black ops operating by kidnapping children, by using them without parental consent, that these programs are operating illegally, immorally, unethically, and that only the public can do something about it. Because these agencies are not going to change unless they're forced to.
I just had a light bulb go off in my head, okay? For the people that say, what can we do? What should we do? Here's a plan, okay? My page is Deciphering My Experience. I post things on YouTube. Penny has a story. I have a story. We all have stories. I believe the best way for us to show everyone that our stories are true is to simply ask everyone else, share your story. Be honest. Step out of the shadows. Make a YouTube video. Go ahead, put it up. Put Deciphering My Experience and your name behind the video and tell your story. Something odd about your life. You don't have to give your whole life story. Share something that you think no one else would believe, but it's your life story. And just put in the title, Deciphering My Experience, your name, tell your story, and let everybody start realizing that we can become more comfortable with sharing our stories. We don't have to hide in the shadows. We don't have to have matching histories to have positive futures.
Sounds good. So mine's already up as Nacht Waffen pilot.
Yep, yours is already up. Yep. And people, you know what? If anybody wants to start their own page, start your own page. If you can't think of a name, throw Deciphering My Experience on there and then talk away. And then that way it helps me because you can then vote with your dollar because it makes my name go in the algorithm, and that's how you can help me. I can certainly use your help. Penny can use your help. Like, subscribe, do all the fun stuff to get our information out there.
Well, I was going to say, we're getting close to the end. It was time to shamelessly plug, and you just did.
Yeah, right? It is what it is. I mean, this is I'm sorry, this is the nature of the beast right now. As far as I'm concerned, this is World War III. And you need to choose sides, folks. And if you're not going to be in the front trenches, then you better start supporting the people that will be there. It just is what it is. This is a 4D war right now. So way back when, I remember all the yellow magnets on everybody's cars. Support your troops. Well, you know what? Pick your favorite 4D veteran because there's a fight going on. And if you're not going to get in the mix, you better start supporting the people that will.
Mm-hmm. Because there is a for real war going on, and there are going to be real casualties. Actually, there have been already.
Mm-hmm.
Over the last 50 years, there's been Bill Cooper, there's been
Phil Schneider.
There's been
Olson. CIA, the guy that threw out the window.
Oh yeah, the guy that was thrown out the window. There were guys that were shot with the ice pellet gun. There have been people hit with microwaves. There have been people and these are folks that we may not know their names ever because
I would like to know if anybody
shut down.
If anybody has any insight to the eye drops that the CIA was giving me when I was a child. I have no idea technically what was in there. I have suspicions, but if anybody has any insight on that program and could contact me, I would really appreciate it.
Yeah, Lord only knows what you were exposed to as a child with those eye drops. And then I I had a question while you were talking about the South Pole. You
Mhm.
said the oxygen was stripped out of your body. What are
Yep.
the long-term effects of that?
Well, I wouldn't. That's a good question.
You don't have an answer. All right, you're going to have
I'm
to
gonna have
look
to look
into
that one up. Apparently, I can tell you about what the acute effects were when I was there, but I never really thought about a long-term effect from that. Thank you. I have something to do now.
Don't get paranoid about it.
Oh no.
This is what happens when you talk to me, right?
Yeah. Yeah, like now I just got all fired up because I'm like, oh no, I know it's not going to be anything good. It's never anything good when I look up stuff that Raytheon did to me.
Yeah, I look up stuff,
Mhm.
symptoms that I have, and think about what was done to me in
Mhm.
the Black Ops and wonder,
Mhm. Yeah.
what did they do that caused this?
Yeah,
So,
well, it's really funny actually because now when I go out and about and my girlfriend and I get harassed by people because we don't have masks on, um, because of our health choices. But as you bring it up now, it's actually so funny because they oftentimes turn to, like, we get heat from people for it. You know, people get angry because we don't have masks on. And we get comments like, oh, wow, what are the odds of you both not wearing a mask? And it's like, well, what are the odds of you asking two people, what are the odds that we both met at the South Pole Station and had to winter over in conditions that would like slaughter your lungs? So yeah, what are the odds? But I get that you don't know that. And nor do I have to run around giving my medical history to everybody, but it just cracks me up that this is the world that we're in. You know, people
yeah.
just, they presume so much and then they do everything that they're told, and they're really good regurgitators. It's really interesting how I remember when
Well,
people used to think. I remember
that's
looking
what
at
they're
someone and
taught.
watching them think, and you could
That's what
see the
they're
gears
taught.
going.
That's what they're taught in school, though, is to regurgitate
Mm-hmm,
for the test.
mm-hmm,
They are not, they haven't been taught to think for years.
mm-hmm,
I remember taking logic in school. It was taught both in sophomore English
mm-hmm,
and in geometry class.
mm-hmm,
And we spent half the year studying logic in geometry class. That's
mm-hmm.
why it was so difficult. And in speech class, we were taught something called rhetoric that's no longer taught anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And that has to do with being able to do both sides of a discussion
Mm-hmm.
and figure out which one you agree with, but still be able to argue the other side.
Yes, that's a lost art today. Everybody has 50% of the conversation they can carry.
Yeah, they cannot fathom the other side of the discussion.
Right.
So
If you
that,
hate, if you support one candidate and hate the other, but you cannot actually hold a conversation for the reverse role, you're not really smart enough for the conversation technically. That's life. But a lot of people
yeah,
can't admit that. If you can't
so,
argue the other way of your opinion, you're not that intelligent.
and that was the skill that was taught in rhetoric.
Mm-hmm.
And by the time my kids, born in the 80s, were in high school, that had stopped being taught. So they're approximately your age, give or take a little.
Mm-hmm.
And so I know my children were not taught that in school. I tried to teach them that at home, but
Mm-hmm.
it's boys listening to mom.
Yeah. I went to a very good, in certain aspects, grammar school. Educationally, we were taught well. We learned a lot of information for children. Logic, rhetoric, grammar, phonics is something that's also missing nowadays. Blows my mind that kids aren't taught phonics.
Yeah. How do you approach? I've seen the posts of the ignorant people in some backwoods area writing out words, and it's like, what is this? If you read it phonetically, you know what they're talking about. But if you don't know phonics, you're lost.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
And I just tell the people, this is what they're referring to. Well, how can you decipher it? Because you say it instead of decode the letters.
Yes, there's a lot of
do the phonics.
There's a lot of language studies that go beyond just wielding one. You can actually learn all the way down to how to make one, why you would make one this way versus this way. I mean, there's so much to be studied. But again, here's the way of the world is that, I'm sorry, but if I'm not mistaken, I would say that a elementary school education at the early 1900s was probably giving you a better end product than a complete college degree right now, short of a master's.
Yeah. I've seen some of the textbooks. They gave a much better education. And some of the tests that were required to graduate from 8th grade, I dare say most college seniors would have trouble with.
Dictionaries way back when had so much information in them about like sentence structures and language and almost a complete through high school education you would find in older dictionaries, and you just had to read it, and you could accomplish a lot with just that book. And people way back when had the wherewithal. They didn't have the distractions, and their base education was a lot higher. And they knew how to think. They were given the tools to think.
They were given the tools to think until my generation came along, and we told the elites that they were in error and we weren't going to do it anymore. And that was when the CIA started infiltrating us with drugs and
looking for those with skills.
And infiltrating the rest and drugging us down and putting us in prison. And they started deliberately dumbing down the population by watering down the schools under titles like No Child Left Behind. That means that everyone is at the common denominator of an 80 IQ instead of everyone being dragged by the 140. So we've ended up with a much worse educated society where people are not given the tools to think, and they think this is the way it's supposed to be. And in fact, there was a woman who wrote a book called The Deliberate Dumbing Down of America.
I'm recollecting it.
It's free on her website. You can download the PDF. And she was part of the Reagan administration. So this has been an ongoing problem for at least 40 years.
Yep. It's one of the first things people need to realize is that the problems that we have are operating over long timetables. These are long cons. These con men are operating on long timetables because they can afford to. They're not buying in for the short game. They're buying in for the long con.
Exactly. Their proposition is to control the population entirely. And that is a long con. It's not a short-term one.
I found out something recently that I've been waiting to share with you. It just popped into my head. So you've always pointed out bloodlines, family lines. It goes right into that long con thing. These are not things that are happening overnight or in one lifetime even. Okay?
Yeah.
So I'm finding things out in my bloodline, and you'll get a kick out of this because you're a fountain of info in the history of things. So I was chatting with my father recently and discussing with him my grandfather, who was
Okay.
a sailor in the Navy during World War II, and the only veteran I've ever met that was stationed on the Amazon River in World War II. And I was discussing this with my father to get, he's getting older, so getting his recollections up and talking to him about stuff. And he's hearing me out, and he's giving me info and respecting what's going on and saying, all right,
Good.
sorry this has happened, all that stuff. But I was bringing up this fuel thing, and he's, chewing on it and thinking about it. And, he goes, that's not the only thing that he was doing there anyway. Like, he's like discounting a little bit because it's his dad. I get it. But he says, your grandfather was there to get rubber from the Brazilian army was gathering the rubber from the forest, and so he was there. He was getting fuel and getting rubber. And I said, Dad, you know the history. I said, the Bushes were accused of trading fuel for rubber. I said, the Brazilians weren't getting rubber from the jungle. I said, they're getting rubber from the German Buna factories.
Yeah.
Buna rubber was getting shipped into South America and traded for fuel. That's the history of the crime of the Bush family.
Yeah.
So I just thought that was great. I'm like, Dad, you've got it.
And the Germans were getting the rubber from Indochina, which is today called Vietnam.
Mhm.
And even though it was a French colony, the Germans had taken over France and were taking the rubber and using it to trade, because the Allies could not go forward without rubber tires. And yeah, it was, even though they were in this bloody conflict, they had to trade to keep each other running. And at any point in the supply chain, it could have been stopped and both sides would have been grounded.
Right, the war would have been over and the profiteers would have stopped profiting, but we can't have that happen on this planet ever.
Oh, I know.
I mean, heaven
That's
forbid.
one of the major crimes of my bloodline is all of these constant wars.
Mhm.
I've been mortified by who I've been related to and their reactions to finding out I was related to them. I have been called worse things by my blood kin than I have been by the folks investigating them.
Mhm. Mhm.
And I was recently informed that they had lost me, that my personal family line had been lost in the records when we were exiled to America. And so it's been interesting them making contact with me after I got all the records on Ancestry.com.
Mhm.
And their reaction that I was Rh positive. It's been an interesting mix, and I'm not sure I would have shared anything about it if I had known ahead of time
Mhm.
how much trouble it was going to cause me.
I can follow
Now,
that.
now I understand why my grandparents hid it from us. And I've actually apologized to my little brother for having fucked it up. So, and told him that, I really hope it doesn't bleed over on him and his son.
Mhm. Well,
So,
I think the best thing that we can do is try to make things better for the rest. I mean, that's all we can really do at this point, is to try to take these right thoughts and put them to right actions as best we can.
well, who would have thought trying to find out who my family was going to cause that kind of problem?
Yeah. Yeah. Yep. But I mean, family can be tricky like that sometimes, It's, I mean, normally in in so many circumstances, you have a disagreement with someone, and ego gets in the way. And I almost feel like within family members, our egos get fired up faster.
Yeah, I can see that.
You know, and what do they say? Was it anger gets you in trouble and pride keeps it there? And when you're talking about families, I mean, that's like the pride, so to say. I mean, it is what it is. It's almost the heart of
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, where my tendency is to treat it like a clan,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and clan pride. I'm realizing I'm being seen as a threat. And so there are more people who would be willing to shoot me. So, yeah,
Well,
it is
I'm
what
way
it
up
is.
in Alaska, and I got thrown off of Facebook, so I don't even know that I'm technically in contact with anyone anymore.
You're
So,
in contact with me.
well, I mean, like family wise and stuff from down in the lower 48 and things. With the State of the Union being what it is, we're all pretty well isolated, and I think most people are scared to exit their homes at this point.
I'm not scared to exit my home. I'm simply unwilling to interact.
Oh, and I'm not. And I didn't want to include myself in that one. I'm actually. I'm. The rules up here in Alaska have changed and gotten really like World War III-ish. The laws changed, and I always tell people they're changing the laws. Read the wording. That's what they plan on doing, or they wouldn't have made the law say it. I mean, it's quite
Yeah,
simple.
that's what they're planning on doing, or they wouldn't have made it say it legally. Yes,
Right.
this is very true. And I'm watching in my state, California, that the governor thinks because it's a state of emergency over the bug, that he has full dictatorial privilege, and the state courts have informed him that he's in error, and I'm watching that play out.
I'm just noticing up here locally that the paperwork is now stating a similar state of tyranny. Even though they're not enforcing it, the paperwork just presented itself out of nowhere.
Well, a friend in Canada informed me in May that Trump had actually declared martial law on March 20th. And since he had fired the FEMA director, who should be in charge of the country during a 50-state of emergency, that made Trump the FEMA director and basic de facto dictator for the duration.
Okay.
And I'm looking at this and trying to figure out, okay, we've had an election that's disputed still. So was that a legal election given that we were in a 50-state of emergency? And I'm looking at the legalities and I can't find anyone who actually has an answer. They just sort of, I get the deer in the headlights stare and the jaw dropped open and basically an, oh my God, you had to go there.
Mm-hmm. Well, there's a lot of legalese that's being debated right now as to what means this and what means that. And I have a feeling people are going to learn very fast. They should have been reading the Constitution, because that's going to be the answer to all of these debates as to what can and cannot be.
Yeah, and the Constitution says that treaties take precedence over the Constitution. So you really need to know what's in all those treaties, because
It depends.
that could have an effect on things too. We've signed an awful lot of things with the United Nations.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just sitting here going,
Yep.
So
I keep hearing stories about how everything's going to get better. And I mean, if you literally just take away what's being thrown on the mass media, right? I don't want to discuss the presentation, but if you literally just look at the world around you in your day-to-day activities, what's not tyranny going on? Like, forget the story. I don't want to talk about why we're doing it, and people justifying what they're seeing. I want people to just walk around and describe what they're seeing. And then ask yourself if you ever thought that you would see anything like this going on. And then ask yourself if you would then believe that you would allow this to happen for what they told you it happened for.
Well, I have watched while 90% of the businesses in my county have gone under, over 8 deaths in a population of 50,000.
There's some lying going on in our planet.
Well, we're at the end of our time, and I want to ask our audience to stay tuned for Goddesses and Devils with Katie Camara and Amanda McManus. And thank you so much, Eric, for coming.
Thank you very much for having me, Penny. I always love talking to you, and I look forward to the next time.
Awesome.
Have a great day.